Can you ask questions in Spanish yet? You can't learn a language only using affirmative sentences. You have to be able to ask questions. But do you know which ones are the most important for you as a native English speaker so you can keep a conversation flowing and actually be able to practice your Spanish abilities with native speakers? It's no secret that some questions are massively more important than others. So in this video, I'm going to show you the most important Spanish questions that you need to learn so you can rapidly boost your Spanish speaking abilities. Let me know in the comments which questions are the most difficult for you to pronounce, and I'll try to create something to show you how to pronounce these correctly. And stay tuned until the end of the video because I'm going to give you my favorite resource for practicing listening comprehension so you can improve your pronunciation. My first question is probably one that you've heard before. ¿Cómo te llamas? And this question is very important because it's how you start to introduce yourself in Spanish. The literal translation of this is how are you called? But in English, that would sound a little bit silly. After you ask somebody this question, there are certain responses that you could hear. The first one could be gusto en conocerte. This is a very simple way to say nice to meet you. Or somebody could reply, ¿de dónde eres?, which is going to mean where are you from? This one is also a very important question to know in Spanish for a beginner speaker. And the last one, if you're going to ask someone where they're from, you could say, ¿de dónde vienes tú? This is going to mean where do you come from? And when you're responding to this, because you want to keep the conversation flowing, you have to use the verb ser, not estar, and you say, soy de Texas. For example, I come from Texas, so if somebody asks me, ¿de dónde eres?, or ¿de dónde vienes?, I'm going to reply by saying, soy de Texas en los Estados Unidos. I'm from Texas in the United States. And if you want to learn more about when to use ser or estar, go ahead and check out my channel because I made a special video about it. And the rules that I use are quite different than some rules that native Spanish speakers use. And I know if you learn them, they'll help you to get this correct all of the time. A super important question that many people overlook is ¿hablas español? Whenever you meet somebody and you're trying to facilitate a conversation in Spanish, you might want to ask them, do you speak Spanish? Because sometimes we look at people and we might assume that they speak Spanish when in actuality they don't. Something very common that happens in the United States. So whenever you're approaching someone and you want to practice your Spanish with them, say, ¿hablas español? And that means, do you speak Spanish? And a common response you could hear is, sí, hablo español, or no, no hablo español. And if somebody asks you this question, you can also reply using one of these, sí, hablo español, or no, no hablo español. The next question really helped me a lot when I was learning how to speak Spanish because whenever I would go up to somebody and try to strike up a conversation, they would always look at me and say, ¿Cuánto tiempo llevas estudiando español? And for me, for the first couple of years when I was learning Spanish, this was very difficult because somebody is kind of putting you on the spot. They're saying, hey, how long have you been studying Spanish? ¿Cuánto tiempo llevas estudiando español? And you can reply to this using any number that you want. Llevo 5 años hablando español. Llevo 1 año estudiando español. Llevo 2 años estudiando español. And this is going to give people more or less a good idea of what your Spanish level is. This is important because when you start speaking to someone, they'll often try to change the way that they speak to accommodate you because Spanish speakers become very happy when you're trying to communicate with them. So if you get this one right, people will actually change their conversational style to try and help you get better at Spanish. Another very common question that you might hear, especially if you speak Spanish to an intermediate level, is ¿Una vez has estado en México? And this means have you been to Mexico before? But you could really put any country here that you want. ¿Una vez has estado en España? ¿Una vez has estado en Argentina? Or you could get some slight variation. ¿Es la primera vez que vienes a México? Is the first time that you're coming to Mexico? Or ¿es la primera vez que vienes a Argentina? This means is it your first time here in the country? And this one can be very useful for cultural interactions speaking with native Spanish speakers. And you can respond to this one of two ways. Sí he estado en México, or no, no he estado en México. These are the two responses that you can give to someone, and I guarantee you both of them are going to make the person interested and want to talk to you a little bit more. So make sure that you learn this one and you practice it when you're talking to people every day. Another very important phrase that you can use that turns anything into a question is ¿Cómo es. And I made an entire video about the Spanish question word, so check that out if you want to know a little bit more about como. But como means how, and it can help you to learn so much more Spanish, especially if you learn how to say como se dice. That means how do you say something. But if you want to turn anything into a question, you can say como es, and then you can put your phrase there. I could say, ¿Cómo es México en el invierno? How is Mexico in winter? And this could open a big conversation for you to talk about how the weather is in Spanish, and you can really do this for anything you want. Another common question that you might want to ask people, and that I guarantee you people will ask you, is ¿te gusta? When you say te gusta, it means do you like? But the direct translation is a little bit different. This verb gustar is very, very tricky because as English speakers, we would say, do you like? But in Spanish, it's the exact opposite. Instead of saying, do you like something, where you are the subject, it actually changes in Spanish. Gustar means to please. So instead of saying, do you like it, the literal translation would be, does it please you? So you are no longer the subject here. And that is a very difficult aspect of learning gustar and how to say, do you like in Spanish. So if that's something you'd like me to make a video about, let me know in the comments, and I would be more than happy to make something to help you understand how to use the verb gustar. So if you're in Mexico and you're on vacation and you're enjoying some delicious food, the waiter, mesero or mesera, the waiter, might come up to your table and say, ¿Te gusta la comida mexicana? To which you might respond, sí, me gusta, yes, it pleases me, or no, no me gusta. And there are some variations here you could also use. You could say, no, me cae mal. The next question I'm going to tell you is a little bit less for beginner speakers and a little bit more for maybe intermediate speakers. Whenever you're having a conversation with someone in Spanish, it's very important that you're able to ask them what they are doing in a progressive form. It will get very boring if you say, I write, I eat, I sleep. Instead, you want to learn how to ask people what they are doing right then and there, and they're also going to respond with this. Now, hear me out on this one. Whenever you're saying something in a progressive form in Spanish, there are actually two ways that you can do it. Check the link in the description, go to my blog. I have an entire blog post about it so you can understand it from a native English speaker perspective. And I promise you it will help you to understand this much better than people who are just dabbing their feet in Spanish. So if you're not a tire kicker, and I suspect you aren't because you're watching this, go ahead and check out my blog. I promise you it will help you. It's all written in English, and all of the grammar is meant to help you understand it from a native English speaker's point of view. Someone says, ¿Qué estás haciendo? This is the progressive form of the verb, and it means what are you doing? ¿Qué haces? And here you can see that it doesn't have the progressive form, but both of these in Spanish means what are you doing? Or perhaps you're meeting a friend for lunch or for dinner, and you walk in and you see this friend, they might say, ¿Qué te pasa? And this kind of means like, what's going on? What's happening? So if you have a friend who speaks Spanish and you want to practice, go up to them the next time you see them and say, ¿Qué te pasa? And they're going to look at you and they're going to be like, whoa, how did you learn this? Because this is the way a native speaker would approach somebody else. They're going to say, ¿Qué te pasa? It doesn't really mean how are you, but in a sense, it can be used as how are you. Instead, it's going to mean what's wrong. So your friend might ask you this if they notice that something is a little bit off. Maybe you've had a bad day or you're not feeling too well. But you're usually going to use this whenever you notice that your friend might be a little bit down. But it's a very important word that you can use to keep your communication flowing in Spanish. ¿Qué te pasa? If you're traveling in Mexico or even in certain parts of the United States, you want to be able to ask how much does something cost? This is an extremely important question in Spanish. ¿Cuánto cuesta means how much is it? And it's very important if you want to buy something in Spanish. If you go to a store and you want to practice your Spanish and you say ¿Cuánto cuesta to somebody who speaks Spanish, they're probably going to rattle off the numbers. So make sure that you understand the Spanish numbers really well. And if you want to learn more about them, let me know in the comments below. And responding to this question is actually very simple. You just say cuesta and then the number. So I could say, ¿Cuánto cuesta el iPad? And somebody could respond, Cuesta el iPad $400. So the iPad costs $400. And whenever you want to respond to this, you just have to say cuesta and then the number. So it's a very simple way for you to facilitate a conversation when you're speaking to somebody in Spanish. If you're curious to know about how I can help you master Spanish and become a very fluent speaker in just 90 days, go ahead and check the link in my bio. I have a course that's designed with native English speakers in mind that puts you face to face with a native speaker for 90 days. You start out with zero, and by the end of this 90 days, you're able to completely hold a conversation with a native Spanish speaker, and it's also going to give you the time to perfect your pronunciation. Now, I did tell you I would give you my favorite resource for learning how to pronounce words correctly if you are not able to take courses with a native Spanish speaker or take a course like mine, which puts you face to face with a native Spanish speaker. And this is my best kept secret that I tell all of my students, and many of them love it. If you want to learn how to say any of these with the correct pronunciation, there's a website you can go to called forvo.com. And once you're on that website, all you need to do is click on languages, then Spanish, and you can type in the phrase that you want to say. And the thing is, people from around the world are recording these phrases, so you'll be able to hear a native Spanish speaker in the dialect of your choice using these words correctly. It'll give you the chance to listen to how these are pronounced, and then you can practice in front of a mirror. And I also know that having all of these Spanish question words aren't going to help you unless you have a system in place to help you practice them daily. So if you want to grab an entire list of Spanish question phrases that you can use to facilitate a conversation and a language acquisition system that you can implement to help you learn 20, 30, or 40 new phrases in the next 30 days, go ahead and grab the workbook for this video using the link. If you implement this system and practice with these Spanish phrases, it's going to move everything from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. This is something called spaced repetition. It's based in science. I read all of these books so you didn't have to, and all of the studies that show this works. So if you want to practice with all of these words, grab my list below and make sure that you implement the system I have in place. I hope these question words are something that can help you to improve your Spanish with a native speaker and help you boost your conversational abilities in Spanish in as little as 30 days. Don't forget to check out these other videos here because I have an exhaustive list of how all of these Spanish question words work. These are phrases, not just the words. So check out this video if you want more in-depth practice with them, and I will see you guys in the next video.